Hello and welcome to Fire 5 at Phoenix. My name is Zoe Thompson. I'm the coach here at Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching, and I'm joined this evening by Tashon. Tashon is a local basketball coach here in Bristol, although is doing online coaching at the moment with COVID. So this is another episode. I think we're on like 27 now of this season. So we are going live each week. Each week I am joined by a guest. That guest brings 5 questions, and I haven't seen the questions before these live episodes happen. So Tashon is going to introduce himself in just a second, and then we will get straight in to see what questions he's got. And we are the last one on the topic of beliefs. So I am intrigued to see what questions you have this evening. But before we go into the questions, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Tashon. I'm a basketball coach, mainly in Bristol. My thing that I really enjoy is player development. So I enjoy developing players and helping them get to the next step, whether they're aspiring to be pros or just junior players. But I also currently work in a school, and I work with young people who have special educational needs.
Such an important role, and I having seen you coach and seen you with young players, I know like your interaction with the players is so important as a coach, isn't it? Of that, having that role model for a lot of basketball players and just young people in general growing up, isn't it? It's having those positive role models. And you know, we've talked in the last couple of weeks actually about, especially around beliefs, as this is still the topic, of how we can be influenced when we're growing up, of not just our parents, but people who we interact with, and that includes the teachers and coaches as well. So really, really important role to have. So yeah, thank you for all that you do, because I know I've seen you in action. You do an amazing job.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So with that being said, what questions have you got this
You
evening?
mentioned how people can be influenced, and that kind of takes me on to my first question. It's pretty wordy, but yeah. So the first one is, how can family members, parents, or mentors positively support young people's self-beliefs but still keep them quite realistic?
Great question. And I think this is the challenge, isn't it? Of we want to be encouraging, but we also want to be realistic. We want to be motivational, but we also want to keep them grounded. And that's such a hard balance. And I think for me, that's quite often the benefit of having different role models, or a different with coaches and parents and teachers, you've got different influences who will encourage and motivate in different ways. But I think that the grounded, keeping our young people grounded and realistic is really important. But I think the motivation and helping them to challenge those self-limiting beliefs is really important. And I think that's probably more important than maybe I think what I see with young people and see play out in adults is those self-limiting beliefs are much more powerful than quite often the ego and that desire to see themselves bigger and better. So I think sometimes it's that balance, isn't it, of by trying to keep them grounded, we don't want to demotivate and we don't want to feed in those limiting beliefs. And that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. Definitely.
And I think it's when those limiting beliefs when those seeds are sown, they grow really quickly. You know, they're like the most kind of ruthless weed, aren't they? They like, once that seed is planted, it's really hard to dig it up and stop it creeping back in. So I think that's the challenge, I think, for all of us, regardless of who we interact with, of being, motivational and encouraging. I think one of the things that I do notice is that, and one of the things I talk when I'm working with adults, is that when we're young, we have people who challenge us when we say, I can't, or we try and talk ourselves out of it. There's quite often lots of people around us who will challenge that, who say, well, you haven't tried that yet. And what about this? And why don't you give this a go? But when we get into our adult years, we don't have people around us who tend to do that. unless you are quite conscious of surrounding yourself with people who encourage and motivate. And so I think if, you know, it's very easy to find yourself in with groups of people who just go, oh, okay, well, don't worry about it. You know, you don't have to do it. And it's almost feed into that rather than challenging it. So I think we do need to challenge it, but I think encouraging those beliefs is more important.
So would you say it's important to try and surround yourself with people who are not sort of yes people, but kind of support you still?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. I think you need to surround yourself with people who are kind of in that almost the same level or working towards similar goals, so you can kind of share that journey and share experiences. As they become sort of peer mentors, don't they, of people working through things together. I think it's really good to have some people who are at that next level that inspire you to kind of follow on from. I think it's always great when you see people, you know, who are like you achieve, because it makes you, really helps feed into that it's possible, you know, well, if they can do that, then I can do it. So I think who we surround ourselves with is so important. And I think it's very easy, isn't it, to gravitate sometimes to the yes people who let us carry on with what we're doing, don't challenge us, don't push us forward. And I think this is where coaches and teachers are really good at kind of seeing that potential and pushing people forward, isn't it, of helping people to see their own potential. You know, quite often other people will see it first, and then they encourage us to be able to do that. So yeah, I think it's easy to surround yourself with the yes people and stay in that comfort zone. But if you want to improve and you want to keep growing, you need to push yourself and be with people who will inspire you and motivate you. There's a saying, isn't there, of if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
I think that's a great quote.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true. And everything you said about surrounding yourself, I think is very true. And you see it especially with players. And like most recently, I think with Marvin, Tom, and Nassim, those guys have created kind of like a bubble, and Yusuf.
Yeah.
And then they've all just thrived because of it. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you talk to, you know, those guys in particular, when you talk to them, you hear they've found each other's strengths and then they use each other to learn from each other. So, you know, if one's kind of stronger in defense, one's got better shooting skills, then they'll work with each other to share their own learning, if that makes sense. I mean, in coaching, we call it modeling excellence. So, you know, looking at who does what you want to do and how do they do it better? What are they doing that you don't yet do? What's the difference that makes the difference? And modeling, you know, how people, you know, from a basketball perspective, of it's not just about the technique. So what can you see that they do differently, but talk to them and understand how do they talk to themselves differently? What do they do in their routine that's behind the closed doors that you don't see, that they do differently, that helps them to take that next step up to excellence? And I think you get that extra level, don't you, when you surround yourself with those people and I think it's great that even at the ages that they've done this, they've learned to, rather than see each other as competition, they've learned how they can all grow and evolve with each other and using each other to elevate each other rather than kind of in competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I got nothing else to add on to that. I think you hit on the head. But I'll go into my next question, and it might be slightly personal, but you can think of the least personal thing. But
Yeah,
it's
cool.
have I can't even speak. Have self-limiting beliefs limited you in any aspect of your life? And if yes, how do you learn to stop them from hindering you?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody is immune to self-limiting beliefs. I think everybody has that little voice that says, "Are you sure about that? Are you absolutely sure that's what you want to do?" I think the difference is when you learn to push past that, and you learn when that voice is holding you in a safe space, and it's preventing you from getting you to where you want to get to, and when that voice is actually raising some quite legitimate concerns of, okay, maybe you're not ready for this, and knowing the difference. Yeah, absolutely. I've had lots of times, like from a work perspective, I certainly, through getting different promotions, going into leadership and senior management, lots of challenges around there, especially when there's other people who have similar experience that are going for the same promotions. That's always the challenge of, okay, maybe not. The trigger for me, and what's always been a good motivation for me, is when I am competitive. I'll hold my hands up to that. I am competitive, but I think my competitiveness is not necessarily about the success. It's more about, I don't want other people to think that I'm not the hardest worker in the room. Like, I don't want other people to think that other people are trying harder. So much of what I've done has actually been about just me focusing on me, putting in 100%, and it's worked out really well. But quite often that has had to, I've had to overcome those kind of little conversations of, are you sure you're ready for this? So in work, it's come through when I used to compete for Strong Woman, that came through, like, this is only your third competition. You don't deserve to be here. Other people have trained for longer, and, all of those. And then it was, well, you're older than other people, and then you should be at home being a mum, and all of these other things that kind of creep through, that I think sometimes they can be helpful because they help challenge you to what you do really want and help you to push harder. I think self-limiting beliefs are probably shown up in every aspect. Parenting, because there's no rule book for that. And I think sometimes you look around and you see how other people parent, and you're like, oh, okay, how am I doing? And that kind of question. And even from going from employed to self-employed, there's that challenge of, you start to meet other people who've been coaching for years, and you think, okay, well, you've come from a different background, and you bring lots of different experience. But again, you're then for me, it's like academics, when people have got letters after their name, I'm like, oh my God, I don't deserve to be here because I don't see myself in that field. And, I have to question myself still about, you're not an academic. No, you didn't go to university, but you learn continuously. You're continuously learning and doing courses. You just don't like doing it in a classroom. You don't thrive in a classroom environment. You're a practical learner. So no, I'm not an academic, but that's that can't hold me back. I have to question and challenge myself. So yeah, I don't think anyone's immune to it. I think it's what helps keep us grounded. I think it's what helps keep us in check, and we don't run away with ourselves. So I think it is really important. I think it is important to recognize them, pay attention to them, and challenge them.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how this isn't something that I really speak to people about. So it's interesting to see other people have similar self-limiting beliefs, and how small a self-limiting belief can be, but it can have such a big impact. Like you were saying, when you're about to do the strong woman lifting, and you're in your mind is saying, you're a mom, you shouldn't be here, and that literally has nothing to do with lifting. Like, you deserve to be here, you've worked hard to be here, and if you didn't, you wouldn't be here. So it's cool and interesting to know that other people have similar.
Yeah, I've watched. Trying to think. Just listening, when you listen to podcasts or interviews with people who you believe, or your perception is that they're really confident, outgoing people, and then they'll say something, and you think, actually, how much of this is just that persona of, okay, I feel this, but I'm going to push through and do it anyway. And I think it's that there's a great TED Talks by Amy, whose last name escapes me for a moment. She talks about the power pose. And so there's lots of people who speak in public who still struggle with nerves, struggle with the self-limiting beliefs of, what have I got to say? And why do people want to hear me? And they go through this whole kind of power pose of like getting into that confident body state before they walk onto stage. Brené Brown, who talks a lot about vulnerability, she talks about her first TED Talks and how it went viral, and how like her whole limiting belief of, why would people listen to me? What do I have to contribute? Kind of like exploded in her head the morning after. Mm-hmm. So I think, it is just, I think, calling it out for what it is, and then asking yourself, what is it, what is it that I'm trying to hold myself back from? But then also, what will I achieve when I push myself forward? And what is it worth? Is it worth going through this being uncomfortable to get to where I want to get to?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it earlier, working hard, as cliche as it sounds, can help to eliminate some of that doubt and those voices in your head that are saying you can't do this.
Yeah, and I went through a phase. I didn't recognize it for what it was at the time, but after I'd gone through a bit of a period of time where I'd really lost my confidence, I just started to force myself to say yes to things, and that was a big game changer for me. So I kind of knew what I was doing at the time, but I don't think I really realized when I sort of sat out and was like, right, okay, enough's enough. Just start saying yes to stuff. Just when opportunities come up, start saying yes. And I did so much in that time. I did Tough Mudder. I did different physical challenges. I went for promotion in work. I volunteered to be seconded in work. It was just every time opportunities came up, and the little voice in my head said, oh, no, you're not experienced enough, or you haven't trained enough, you're not fit enough, you're too old, all of that stuff. I would say yes and then think I'll worry about it afterwards. And that was how Strong Woman came about, because somebody who I was training with at the time said, Bristol, there's a gym doing an open day in Bristol. Do you want to come down? And I was like, okay, yes. And I went down, and yeah, well, we all know what happened after that. So it's just, that was just me saying yes, pushing past all of the questions in my head and just giving it a go.
Yeah, I don't think many people could do that. So congratulations.
I have to say, though, if we're being honest, and I think people who know me well will say that I should probably stop and think a little bit more often, though, because I think that is my go-to response, is to say yes, start doing it, and worry about it after. Whereas actually, I think sometimes that lands me in a little bit of trouble, and I could probably do with being a little bit more reserved, thinking about it a little bit more, and then saying yes rather than just kind of jumping in with 2 feet.
Well, moving on, how do you effectively manifest your beliefs without simply having an idea and just thinking it will happen and just hoping and praying? So how do you I know it's a difficult question, but how do you turn so you've passed the state of doubting yourself and that sort of stuff, and now you have an idea or ideas, or you see how you want your life to be. How do you then start with manifesting that to be a reality instead of kind of just an idea in the back of your head? And there's probably not a set in stone answer for this, but what do you do, or what helps you?
It's really, I think manifestation is coming up a lot more now, isn't it? People are talking about manifestations and what you have to manifest what you want. I think for me, it's you have to have that action. I think it's all very good putting it out there what you want, but you have to put the action and the energy and the effort in behind it to make it happen. I think for me, it's about being really, I think it's about the clarity of what it is that you want. And I think that's where manifestation can be really helpful, is thinking about what you want, what will be different, what will that success look like, what will it feel like, what what's the compelling purpose behind it? Why is this so important? And I think once you know that, it makes it a lot easier for you to put the drive behind it to make it happen, because you've worked out, again, this comes up so often, but the difference between motivation and discipline. And I think when you know what you're working towards and you know why you're working towards it, it's a lot easier to stay disciplined when the motivation drops off. So I think for me, one of the most, planning is always, the bit that I think quite often gets overlooked, of just breaking it down into what that looks like. So, thinking ahead, what is it that you're working towards, but being realistic about the effort and the energy that's needed to make it happen. And then looking at the time that you have to invest that effort and energy, and then being really realistic about how you can show up to make that happen. I think a lot of people, and I've done this myself, but a lot of people overestimate how much they have to give this. And sometimes I think people get caught up in the moment and they get overexcited about how much they want it, when in reality, with all of their other competing priorities, it's like you might really want it to happen, but by the time you've done all of the other things that need to happen, how much energy and enthusiasm is left for you to make that happen. So for me, when I'm either working it through for myself or helping other people to work through it, it's about getting them to be really honest about why is it they want it, and then realistically how much effort and energy have they got to make it happen. Because that's what you need to manifest it, is you need to be able, I think for me, consistency, but it is about being able to show up with the effort and energy to go into it to make it happen, whatever that looks like. So for some goals, I guess, for some things that you want to happen, it's a lot lower. So it's a lot easier to just consistently kind of show up and kind of chip away at it. And then other things, if you wanted to be professional in sport, that's a lot of effort, it's a lot of energy, and potentially a lot of sacrifices to make in there as well. And so that's when you really need to challenge the compelling purpose of, okay, you want this to happen, what are you willing to do to make it happen? And then that's when you can then start to plan it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I should say, staying on the topic of manifestation, for you, what do obviously I don't need to know your goals and aspirations, but if you had if you was to manifest something, for you, is that do you see it very clear before you want to like go and achieve it, or is it just kind of an idea? Because speaking to people, sometimes like people can see what they want clear as day, and they literally picture themselves in a certain situation, whether it be playing professionally or a promotion at work, where some people kind of may just have an idea and they can't see it. For you, what does that look like?
So if it's longer term, it doesn't look like anything. I find it really difficult to kind of look quite far ahead. So most of the things that I am working towards are shorter term goals. That's always worked really well for me. A year at the most of, okay, what do I want? And I find it a lot easier then to really be able to get into the detail of what that looks like. But if you were, I'm hoping that your next question is not this, of where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years time? I don't have an answer. I know that there's certain things from, a bucket list of things that I want to achieve in life, but I haven't got that bit planned out. So I know what the ingredients are, if you like. I know what things I want to happen and how that might look, but I don't have that clarity. I do that the kind of shorter term.
Yeah.
So I think I can kind of set from a business perspective, I plan 3 months at a time. So I have an idea of what I want to achieve over the 12 months. I've kind of got that broader view, but the actual detail in the planning is only ever 3 months at a time.
I'm the complete opposite.
Are you?
It's really bad. I'm just like the future, and then I just don't like live in the present. I was just like so heavily focused on the future, and is not good at all, because you just stuff passes you now and you just don't. It's like when I look back, I'll be like, that was really cool. That was so sick, and I didn't appreciate it, and then I'm just left there, still focusing on the future.
I think there's a balance to be had, isn't there? And I think there is I think you can achieve that balance of enjoying the moment, celebrating the moment, being in the moment, but still working towards the future. And I think it is a learned practice. But I think, I don't know, do you think society contributes to that? Because there's so much, isn't there, when you look at social media or expectations of, okay, what's next for you? How often do you get asked that, right? What's next for you? And I don't know, I'm just doing what I'm doing now, but that's in schools, right? What do you want to do next? And what do you want to do after that? And what do you want to do after that? And you should be planning for this, and where do you want to be in 5 years time? That a lot, I don't know whether is it our society that shapes that forward focus rather than having shorter term goals and in like that, being more present and enjoying where you are. I don't know. Have you or has it always been like that for you?
Yeah, probably. I'd say, yeah, it's probably since college. So yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a mixture of things though, like background, society, social media, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah.
I think it's a challenge, isn't it? Because when I look back, I think there's lots of things that I have done that have all contributed to me being where I am now. And I don't think I would change any of that, because ultimately it's put all of the tools in the toolbox for me to do what I do now. But if somebody had said to me when I was in school, what do you want to do? This wouldn't have been the answer. Yeah. So it's almost, I think that's, and this is what came up a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about, children in school at the moment having to make decisions when the world is all a little bit chaotic, of how do we as adults help them to make those decisions. And we were talking about how, helping them to understand what's important. So don't attach a job description to it or a career description to it, but help our young people to understand what it is they get enjoyment from, where do they get their most fulfillment from, where do they feel their purpose is, because that will feed into all of the decisions that they make. Yeah. But again, it's that I think we do push people to think more about the future, don't we? And I think we do need to think about the future, but there is a balance.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're in education, is definitely something that is focused on so much what's next. When you go to secondary school, is where you're going to go, college or apprenticeship. College, where you're going to go to university. University, where you're going to work. What industry do you want to work? So yeah, it's definitely something that the society and education system pushes.
Yeah, I think there's value in having some idea of what you want your next step to be. But I think the next step after that, I think the world's moving too quickly for that now. And people are on, I think the generations are changing. I don't think people are looking for 30, 40-year careers anymore. People are just looking for the next thing that ticks the boxes for them. So I don't think it's like in school 30, 40 years ago, maybe, like that, when it was then, what career are you going into? And that was it. You went in at 18 and you retired at 60 or, whatever age it was. I think now, I don't think the mentality is the same. I think things are changing. So the conversations need to change.
Yeah, there's like a stat as well that people change career. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like people change career every 5 to 8 years or something like that. So it makes sense.
Yeah, that would tie in with my experiences. I think people get itchy feet. I think it depends also the challenge, isn't it? Of people get, people want a change of location or a change of team or a change of dynamic.
Yeah.
And change of job completely. But I was 38 when I found this role, and I think, you know, it took me 20 plus years to work out, you know, I like this bit of this job and this bit of this job, and this is what I'm good at, this is what I can do, but I'm, you know, somebody else could probably do better, and just kind of shape it into where you end up.
And I think it's better that way anyway, to work like that. But I'll go on to question 4.
Okay.
Is how do you remain strong to your self-belief if you're surrounded by doubters or negative thinkers?
Oh.
Sorry.
No, it's a great question, because I think it's something we've all experienced, isn't it? I don't know whether it's, I don't think for a lot of people who are the negative thinkers and what was the other description? The doubters, yeah. Because I genuinely think that if you spoke to a lot of people who come across like that, they would describe themselves as realists, or they would see it as having good intentions. I don't think anybody walks around would describe themselves as negative.
Yeah.
It's more I think, you know, naturally we see the negative before we see the positive. It's how we are designed as humans. So the thinking positive and seeing the positive is that learned behavior. And so we, you know, for some people it's more challenging than others. But I think people who are doubters or more negative just see themselves as looking at all of the risks before they then look at the benefits, whereas others look at the benefits and then weigh up the risks. So I know that for me, being positive is sometimes a challenge for other people to be around. So I think maybe it's probably the question is the other way around, of how do other people cope with me always trying to find the positives in everything? Because actually, you know, sometimes it is really important to sit with the negative and not kind of brush it over and get to the positive too quickly, because that is part of the process. Yeah. So I think for me, I go positive then negative, but I think you do need to have both. Yeah, I think it's probably the other way around. I think it's, for me, it's probably it's that frustration of I actually think that there's probably a benefit for me to be around the doubters and the negative thinkers, because they help me ground and not get too carried away and stuff, and help me to think about the realities and the risks and weigh things up. So I think the challenge for me is to not shut them out too quickly, and to not disregard quite often some of the important things that they do raise. So I think they probably help balance, but I think my go-to is still then to think more about the positives, and kind of, I'm a bit stubborn, to be honest. So sometimes it's like, I've already made my mind up, so you know I am going to still do this, right? Yeah. It's like, you can talk about all of these things, but you know I'm still going to do this. So I think actually the doubters and the negative thinkers play quite an important role for me in keeping myself in check and not getting too carried away in seeing everything as a positive. And so I think they do serve a good purpose for me, but yeah. I'd still end up doing what I'm going to do anyway.
And that's probably a good trait to have if, like, you have negative people, or even if for some people it might be their parents who are the negative person, others it might be friends or cousins or whatever. But yeah, I think everybody has one person who, when you have an idea or something you want to do, they're not the first person you think of.
Yeah. So we have like two sets of people, don't we, who we go to. So when we want the yes people, when we want somebody to go, yeah, that's a really good idea, go and do that, we have one phone a friend. And when we have somebody who, like, I don't want to hear this, but I need to hear this, we have a different person who we call. And I think with parents, and especially, you know, we want to keep our children safe, and we want the best for our children. We probably see the risk before they do. So I think that kind of gives the tendency to think about those things to keep them safe before we think about all of the positives. So I think young people are a lot more risk averse, aren't they? As we get older, we become more risk aware. So I think that's the challenge, isn't it? The parent-child conversation is that the young people are much more risk averse and like, yeah, like this. What do you mean risk? What would you mean something could go wrong? Whereas the parent are kind of balancing that out. So I think that's sometimes why maybe young people feel like parents are a bit more negative, but it's done again with good intention of seeing the bigger picture and wanting to keep people safe and in one piece.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I wouldn't know about the parent side yet, but one day I'll probably find out about it. But
Yeah.
My last question, hopefully, is
Wow. Yeah.
not as difficult as some of these were, but success like differs for everyone, but requires a similar drive and sense of determination. So saying this, do you think it's possible to succeed without self-belief?
That's a great question. Is it possible to succeed without self-belief? I don't know that it is. That's such a great question. And I think the amount of self-belief that's needed is probably very dependent on what success looks like. So I think, and interestingly, I think what I would see as for me, if to describe what success looks like now, is probably very different to what it was 10, 20 years ago. If we think, in the basketball world, for you to want to, if your idea of success is playing basketball professionally, you need a lot of self-belief to be able to do that, because the challenges along the way are constantly going to knock that and continuously challenge your own self-belief and the belief of others around you. So I think it probably, I think that that's the question, isn't it? Of when you've got external sources, external people that are challenging those beliefs, you have to have that strength in the belief in yourself to carry that through, don't you? So I think, such a great question. I think the answer is you need to have that self-belief. I think the context around that is that it depends on what success looks like for you and to how much that belief is needed and how much that might be challenged by external sources.
Would it help? You've answered it great, but would it help if I gave two different examples?
Yeah.
So one version would be the everybody's dream to have a family, wife and kids, wife and kids, husband and kids, your dog, a nice car, and a really nice house. And the other is something, for example, more creative, to be, I don't know, a very good music artist, a musician. Yeah. So those are the two examples of success.
You're right, they are very different examples, aren't they? Because the first example is there's a lot of opportunity in terms of meeting people, meeting the right person. There's also lots of effort and energy and skill needed to keep that relationship working and make that relationship work. I think you can't underestimate that. Whereas I think the second example is very much skills based and opportunity. So skill and opportunity in both, isn't there? But I think there's probably if in terms of mapping out what that path to success looks like, I would guess that the second one is probably a bit more tangible in terms of like, these are the steps that will get you from A to B, whereas I think the first one probably doesn't have that direct path, and that path will look very different to different people. So I guess you just have to hope that the perfect match is on the same path and you're not both walking off in different directions. But I think both need skill, both need opportunity, but very different paths.
Yeah. Would you say it's possible to succeed at any without a type of self-belief?
I mean, it's just, I guess it's whether or not you see self-belief as feeding into confidence as well. And I think you have to believe that things, you have to have an element of belief that things are going to work, don't you? Again, it's that otherwise you get into that self-fulfilling prophecy, don't you? If you wake up every morning and say it's going to be a bad day, you look for all of the signs that it's a bad day. If you wake up every morning in a relationship that you don't feel it, you don't believe is working, then you look and see all of the signs that show you that that's not working. So I think you do need that element of belief in there. I think when other people are involved, there's a belief in yourself and a belief in other people. I guess with career choices, it's a belief in your ability and skill. I do think it is needed, but again, it's something that's learned. So whilst you may have previous experience or a previous, old beliefs that challenge that, because they're a belief, you can challenge whether or not you still believe that to be true and believe in something different. So yeah, that's a great question.
Sorry.
Well, I'm intrigued though. I do need to throw that one back to you, because I'm really intrigued and genuinely curious as to what you think.
Do you need self-belief?
Yeah.
I think 100%. 100%. Whatever you want to do, no matter how big, how small, I think there has to be a tiny part, or for some things, it might be a big part of you that believes in yourself, but also believes that you can do it. And that might be taking your GCSEs or attempting to play professional basketball, like some people will, or if you want to have a long-lasting family and a nice home and a dog and kids, I think you have to have self-belief that you can do it.
Mm. And I think this kind of loops back to the first question, doesn't it? Of when we don't have that self-belief, how important other people who see potential, see capability, they have that belief in us before we believe it ourselves, is just so incredibly important. And I think, this is where it kind of links into the work that you do. And I guess the work I do as well, to an extent, of helping people to see their own potential and helping people to start believing in themselves is such an important role. I'm not, I get the same vibe from you, in that it's not something you can ever take for granted, of being part of somebody's journey in that way.
Yeah, and that's something I'm really lucky to do and be a part of people's journey, but it never feels as if I'm helping them. I don't know, like it doesn't feel like I'm fueling them with self-belief or anything on that sort. It just feels like we're training, and then sometimes you get feedback and people really appreciate it, and it's like we were just playing basketball. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's amazing how much that transfers over. I mean, I know even from my own experience with sport, that pushing past barriers in sport and seeing my, being able to push past what was comfortable, and when you've got a coach in front of you that says, you can do this, and then you do it, that isn't just something that happens in sport. That transfers into, so many different areas. And I know that when I was doing well in sport, I also did really well in work, because suddenly it was like, yeah, I can do that. I can apply for that. I can do this. I can volunteer for that, because, I think sport teaches discipline. It teaches consistency. It teaches so many skills that are transferable elsewhere. And I think that's massively underestimated. And I know this would be another hour's topic in itself of why sport is important for young people, because it's not just about the sport, it's about everything that they learn in that sport and their confidence in themselves, teamwork, communication. All of those things are so incredibly important. And I think, yeah, that I think just the confidence and self-belief is just one very small element of what sport is for people, but it's, you know, it's huge in how quickly that you sow the seed in one area and watch it grow across all areas of their life so quickly.
Definitely. And people with a lot of self-belief usually perform better, succeed more, and go on to do things they probably didn't think they could.
Yeah.
Even if that little bit of self-belief, or sorry, even if you have a little bit of self-belief and there's not much. And I think having self-belief can also help talk to the little bad guy on your shoulder, that the doubt that tells you that you can't do something or you're unable to do something.
And I think that's the key, isn't it? Is everybody's got the positive voice and the negative voice, and it's knowing when to turn one up and when to tune one out, and sometimes when to listen quickly and then tune it out and then turn the other one back up again. But how often do you hear professional sports people who say that they can pinpoint it back to one coach who had some belief in them and gave them, you know, gave them some of their time and their energy, and then things started to happen?
That's true. And I can definitely see it when I think back to my playing career and even like gym stuff, personal trainers I've had. I can definitely see it. But at the time when I'm coaching, it doesn't feel like I'm doing a big job. It just feels like I'm doing what I need to do. But
it's also the authenticity of something that you are passionate about, isn't it? And that when you feel in flow, that you're enjoying it, it's something you enjoy, that it doesn't feel like hard work, that it's something then, but you know, sometimes that's what transfers, and it's that energy that people pick up on. So, but it's amazing.
Yeah.
What great questions.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if they'd be too easy or not.
But I think that's the thing for me, is that because I don't know what the questions are, I have to think on the spot anyway. But I think what I've loved about this month, I mean, it's a great topic anyway, but I think what I've loved about this month is that the questions have made me really stop and think, oh, okay, and I like kind of working it out. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We will get the links for where people can find you for training, coaching. So we'll put those links in onto the different platforms, so people can find you, find out more about you. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for answering my questions in so much detail.
Well, thank you for bringing them. I really enjoyed the conversation. We will get this out everywhere. Like, subscribe, share it out to people. Check out Tashon and his work, doing amazing things. But thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you all very soon.